by far the biggest SEC game this year, and obviously Georgia's biggest game this year is Ole Miss is coming to town. 8-1 overall, 5-1 in the conference, still alive. Technically in the SEC West, one game behind Alabama, even though Alabama holds the tiebreaker. Number 9 in the playoff rankings, Ole Miss. So top 10 team traveling to number 2 Georgia. Georgia is a 10.5-point favorite at home with an over-under of 58.5. Chase, we'll let you go first, then me, and then Quinn. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is an easy one for me. I love Ole Miss. I love Lane Kiffin. I love exactly what they're doing. But Georgia's a powerhouse, man. Like and Missouri, I picked Missouri last week because Missouri is a very quality team this year. People are not expecting them to do what they're doing. Brady Cook made a couple of mistakes. You fixed those mistakes last week, you upset Georgia. Missouri is a very, very, very good football team. That's why the college football playoff rankings only dropped them 2 spots because they're good. It's a good team. And Georgia's now without Brock Bowers. You got to remember that. Sorry, there's like a mosquito. Georgia's without Brock Bowers, by far the biggest MVP on any team in any college football program across the nation. Brock Bowers is an offense by himself. And you don't have him, you still come out and you're winning and beating not only teams, SEC opponents, but quality SEC opponents. And now you're going into the toughest part of your schedule. Missouri, you're going to have Tennessee at some point. You got Ole Miss this week. And then I think you finish out with Georgia Tech. Never mind. Georgia's going to win this game. And the only reason I am pointing towards that is because I'm not huge on the defense that Ole Miss is putting onto the field. Pete Golding has kind of done the same mediocre thing that he was doing at Alabama that cost them games. And if you look at the teams that they've played, they played Auburn, gave up 20 to Auburn. They gave up 35 to Texas A&M. They gave up 21 to Auburn. They gave up 20 to Arkansas. When Arkansas had their former offensive coordinator that couldn't even score more than 3 against Mississippi State. The defense isn't great. The offense will keep you into games, but I think Georgia's defense is going to be able to put down that offense just a little bit. I don't think this is going to be a crazy 50-10 game like it was with the Kentucky game for Georgia. I think this is going to be more of a 31-17, 31-20 kind of a game. Georgia's in control completely the entire way. Freddie?
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, Ole Miss is a better football team than Missouri this year. I don't really think so. You could classify that way, but I don't really think it's that big of a bold take. If you look at the Georgia-Missouri game, 30-21, which honestly, it was a lot closer than that. Missouri had a chance at the end of the game to go down and tie. Ended up not doing that, obviously. But there's a couple of games here between Ole Miss and Georgia that they played 2 similar opponents, right? Obviously, Chase, Auburn, right? Ole Miss 28-21, Georgia 27-20, both on the road. And then you got Vandy where, Georgia went to Vandy 37-20. That was the Brock Bowers injury game, so kind of get a little slide there on that score. But Ole Miss beat them 33-7. So I'm not going to sit here and say that Ole Miss's defense is like non-existent. It's definitely not up to Georgia's standards. But I would argue that they're quick. I think they're a faster defense than Missouri. We'll put it that way. I think Missouri's got more beef and good in on the lines of scrimmage, but I think Ole Miss has a much faster defense. And I think against a team like Georgia this year where they do like to run the ball, right? Georgia always likes to run the ball. But they also like the dink and dunks this year. Carson Beck is very good at those type of passes. So I think that's actually going to favor Ole Miss's secondary there in that matchup. But I do think Georgia wins this game, but I think it's close, man. I don't think Georgia covers the 10.5. I don't know, the last spread that they covered was Florida, and I think they've only covered 2 spreads all year, and that was Kentucky and Florida. I don't think they covered this one, so give me Georgia to win. But if you're a betting man, take Ole Miss and the 10.5 here. Gwen.
All right, preseason when we were talking SEC football, I had two very bold takes. The first one that was that Florida was going to be really, really bad. The second one was that Ole Miss was going to be the third best team in the SEC. I want to give some flowers to Lane Kiffin when it comes to coaches. For all the reason we give Jimbo Fisher so much hate is he has, over the last 3 or 4 years, the fourth best recruiting class numbers of any program in the country. That's not just one recruit. That is multiple classes together, and the only programs ahead of him are Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. Yet he loses to a bunch of teams that recruit worse than him. And there are metrics out there that judge you on these type of things. You played this team, you have better recruiting numbers than them, and you lost. That gives you a negative score. So Jimbo Fisher is the worst coach in the conference when it comes to that. The best coach in the conference is Lane Kiffin.
Oh, come on.
Beating teams who recruit better than him, which tells me that when it comes to his schematics as an offensive mind, until Sarkisian comes to the conference next year, I feel pretty comfortable saying from an offensive play caller position standpoint, he's the best one in the conference right now. Now, when Steve Sarkisian comes with Texas, new debate. But at the moment, Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Not having Brock Bowers is going to help them a lot. Because I think he is the one player on Georgia's offense that could really threaten. Because Freddie's right, they're fast. They're going to be the fastest defense Georgia's played all year. I'm not going to say they're the most technically sound, but they're definitely the quickest team. And not having Brock Bowers there to abuse them in the middle of the field, that's going to be huge. Because now Georgia's got to establish the perimeter to establish the inside. Because if I'm having to guess, Ole Miss is going to sell out on stopping everything on the inside and rely on their speed to shut down the perimeter. I don't know. When it came to the Ole Miss preseason, I picked them to lose one game that made no sense, like their road trip to Auburn, and they almost lost it. And then I picked them to upset Alabama and then lose to Georgia. Clearly, they didn't upset Alabama, and they managed to pull off the win at Auburn. I still think there's a big, and some might say that the win over LSU was their big win. But I feel like there is still a big win somewhere in Lane Kiffin's pocket with Ole Miss. And I don't think he's going to be at Ole Miss much longer. And this is a chance to, where we're sitting now, he's going to have, even if they lose this game, the two best regular seasons in Ole Miss history will both be under Lane Kiffin, which is impressive. And I think they're clearly going to be the choice for a New Year's Six Bowl, or at least they should make a New Year's Six Bowl. But I think they can cement that by beating Georgia. I don't think they can win the West, because for them to win the West, Alabama has to lose to Kentucky and Auburn. That's just not going to happen. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to take Ole Miss to go into Georgia and get a narrow win over Georgia. Because you know what? And we may laugh when we think Georgia's the unbeatable team or whatever, and they could still very easily lose to Ole Miss and go on to make the playoff and win the national title. Georgia is a very talented roster. Very talented roster. But with every team who thinks that they're at the top of the sport, look at Alabama runs over the years. When Alabama went for their three-peat. Just games that preseason you wouldn't have thought was going to be the game that gets them, sneaks up and gets them, and it happens at home. So give me Ole Miss to pull the upset on Georgia and kind of shatter this veil of, being untouchable that exists around them right now.
Wow. College football would go nuts if Georgia loses this game.
To Lane Kiffin?